JQLO, DPI.
JQLO. Sharpie buttons and Sharpie buttons. So basically, the other side of the house comes to us and says they don't like the policy of the government side because of the beliefs that they have, which are apparently blatant lies. Let's first tackle about one of the biggest blatant lies in their argumentation: the issue of contradiction and confusion. Ladies and gentlemen, this is such a blatant lie because what the government is trying to aim is the contribution of both forces into play. Because it works like this. Religion teaches us to abstain from sex. Religion teaches us morals and as to why we should abstain. Well, on the other hand, ladies and gentlemen, sex education teaches us the risk of what happens when we engage in premarital sex, the risk of STD, the long-term risk of what happens to their status of living. So these double forces will further teach us to abstain from illegal sex, ladies and gentlemen. Second is on the issue of encroachment. Ladies and gentlemen, we need a higher force to really intervene because first and foremost, the problem is of a very high degree. We cannot just watch back and look at these people have died from their STDs. We stress that before we even think of the encroachment of these entities, we should first ensure the lives of the citizens, ladies and gentlemen. Because what's happening right now is that local laws of these certain entities are ineffective. What proves this ineffectivity? The high rate of STDs, ladies and gentlemen. So in other words, we need a high entity such as the UN to intervene. Sit down. Let me have my first argument, then your point later. First argument. Because of these double forces, please sit down. Because of these double forces, we double reduce cases of unwanted pregnancies. How is that so? First of all, as I said earlier, religion teaches us to abstain. Religion teaches us to not have sex till after we get married. Or in other polygamous religions, they teach us to have sex with your wives only. Second of all, force of sex education teaches us that we shouldn't have premarital sex or illegal sex because of the risks of STDs, syphilis, herpes, ladies and gentlemen. And I mean that is a very huge problem in Africa that we need solved. Another thing is that force of sex education also teaches us whom to have sex with, and it also teaches us, ladies and gentlemen, whether or not we should pick this wife. They should be careful as to who they marry and who they have sex with, because because of sex education, they are now taught what are the signs and symptoms of people who have STD. Yes, Al.
Clearly, government men are oblivious to the whole idea and the whole principle behind sex education, because in sex education, they teach you safer means of having sex, which is why premarital sex becomes rampant, because people see alternatives wherein they can actually enjoy sex without getting STDs.
But this is where religious education comes into play. Before they actually decide on having sex, religious education teaches them to not have sex to begin with. And what we're trying to stress is that sex education should not only teach you safe sex, should also, more importantly, teach you the risk of premarital sex.
It's not mutually exclusive in your case, because in the opposition we told you there is an option. The same education can be attained, Mr. Chair. However, there is moral basis. We believe that the higher education you're talking about, when it comes to that sex education, can also be media.
But because the problem is very grave and the local laws are still not able to stop the certain problem, we need it mandated. We need a higher entity to intervene, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't why do we give them the option to have STD, ladies and gentlemen? Why do we give them the option to risk the lives of the integrity of their families and their own living status? So let me go to my second argument. Because of these forces, it also reduces case of STD in application of those three forces. Because aside from the fact that they will abstain from sex, we are also prudent enough in believing that people will actually not, that there are people who actually do not listen. And in those cases of people do not listen, for those people who do not listen, the sex education teaches them safe sex. So, if in the event that people do not listen, because the government side takes that into account as well, they are still safe because they are taught safe sex. They hear here. Now, I'd also like to reinforce, the concept of fear. Fear comes into force because of these forces, ladies and gentlemen. Fear, ladies and gentlemen, of the laws of the God that they believe in conjunction, they fear their God or gods, and as such they follow their rules. The rules regarding sex. Not only that, but apart from the fear that applies in their religion, they also now fear of the consequences of premarital sex because of the sex education that is being taught to them. So this double fear further impedes them from having sit down. I've taken 2 points. Fear from having unwanted pregnancy, from having premarital sex, and as such, because of their fear of STD, they will now avoid it, ladies and gentlemen. Lastly, and probably the most practical argument in my list of arguments is the better standards of living. How so? Better standards of living in the sense that, one, people are taught safe sex, people are taught how and when to have sex. And this results, ladies and gentlemen, in one, having better standards of living because they now are wise enough to know that they should have less children so that they can provide for the existing children better. This results in those children having better futures because they're tended more by their families in comparison to those who have a large number of children. Aside from that, there's also the issue of integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, what can be more humiliating than have your children, have a child that has STD or have birth so early in life? Not only do we protect the standards of living of these families, but we also, protect their integrity, that they do not be humiliated in society. So, to sum up this debate, we say that the government is lying. With that, I stand.
Hear, hear.